My husband said he was working late, but when I checked his location, I froze. He wasn't where he was supposed to be, and when I found out why, I felt my whole world turn upside down. But before I tell you what I saw, let me give you a little background on my husband and our life together. I'm Lauren, 35 years old, and I live what I thought was a pretty normal life with my husband, Jake, 38, and our 4-year-old son, Mason. We're not rich, but I've always been smart with money. I plan, I budget, I save, because I believe that financial security is everything, especially when you're trying to buy a house and build a future for your family. Jake? Yeah, he's the complete opposite. To him, money isn't something to save, it's something to enjoy. His life motto: why stress about tomorrow when you can enjoy today? The moment he gets paid, it's like the money burns a hole in his pocket. And don't even get me started on his latest obsession. Lately, he's been acting different, spending way too much time online, binge-watching business and finance videos, talking about successful men, and, most concerningly, fixating on Donald Trump. It started with news articles, then clips of Trump on Hannity, and suddenly, he was all over Trump Truth Social, reading every post. At first, I laughed it off. Okay, he's just interested in politics, no big deal. But then, one night, he texted me, "I'll be home late, don't wait up." I didn't think much of it until I glanced at my phone. His location wasn't at work. It wasn't anywhere near his office. It was somewhere that made my heart stop. Friends, things are about to get crazy. Before I reveal what I found, hit that subscribe button. If you love shocking Reddit family stories, trust me, you won't believe what happens next. At first, I convinced myself there was nothing to worry about. My husband had always been impulsive with money, but lately, something felt different. His spending habits weren't just random anymore, they were calculated. I started noticing small things. He'd spend hours scrolling through news about Trump, Tesla, and Sean Hannity, his eyes lighting up every time he saw a headline like Trump's latest power move or Tesla Model S Plaid, the ultimate status symbol. At dinner, instead of making conversation, he was glued to his phone, reading every post on Trump Truth Social like it was a sacred text. He wasn't just interested, he was obsessed. Then came the moment that really caught my attention. One evening, my husband walked into the kitchen with the biggest grin I'd ever seen. Trump just bought a brand new Tesla Model S and had it parked right in front of the White House. If he has one, shouldn't we get one too, babe? I froze for a second, trying to process what I just heard. Trump has an entire financial empire, and you got your credit card declined at Taco Bell last week. In what universe are you two the same? My husband just shrugged, smiling like I was the one who didn't get it. I should have shut it down right then and there. But after that night, Tesla became his new obsession. He started talking about Teslas like he was a brand ambassador for the company. Zero emissions, instant torque, the Tesla Model S Plaid's 1.99-second acceleration, as if he was planning to drag race on his way to Costco. But the worst part? He started acting like buying a Tesla was inevitable. I should have paid more attention, because it wasn't just talk anymore. One night, something changed. His behavior wasn't just obsessive, it became secretive. And that's when I knew something wasn't right. That night fell off. My husband had been acting strange for weeks, but I had convinced myself it was just one of his phases. He was probably still at work, right? Just another long night, nothing to worry about. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But there was this feeling, this pit in my stomach, that wouldn't go away. It was the same feeling you get when you realize you left the oven on or forgot to lock the door. I shook it off, trying to focus on something else. Dinner was already cold, and Mason had fallen asleep hours ago. I sat alone, waiting, and then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting nothing unusual, maybe a text, a reminder, or an email. But instead, I saw something that made my stomach drop, a location update. My hands hesitated before tapping on it. Maybe I already knew. Maybe my gut had been screaming at me for weeks and I just didn't want to listen. And there it was. He wasn't at work. He wasn't anywhere near his office. The little blue dot blinked on a location that made no sense. A place he had no reason to be. My brain immediately started working through scenarios. Maybe he had car trouble. Maybe he stopped to pick something up. Maybe he was meeting a friend. Maybe he was meeting someone else. A tight knot formed in my chest. Women always know. Even when we don't have proof, even when there's no logical reason to feel it, we know. It's the way a routine shifts ever so slightly, the way someone laughs a little differently, the way a person starts guarding their phone like it holds the nuclear codes. I wasn't sure what I'd find when I got there, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't sit here and do nothing. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and bolted out the door. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The engine roared as I pulled out of the driveway, the cold night air doing nothing to cool the heat rising in my chest. My heart pounded, each beat echoing in my ears as I sped through the dimly lit streets. I didn't know what I was about to find, but I had to know. The closer I got, the heavier the weight in my stomach became. I tried to come up with reasonable explanations. Maybe my husband forgot something and had to pick it up. Maybe he stopped to see a friend. Maybe I was just overreacting. But then I pulled into the parking lot. And just like that, every theory I had went out the window. Not a restaurant, not a bar, not even a shady motel, a Tesla dealership. I blinked for the second times, then checked my phone again, just to make sure I was tracking the right person. Yep, my husband, the same man who complained about our rising electric bill, the same man who always said we needed to save for a house, was here, at a Tesla dealership, at almost midnight. I sat there for a few seconds, trying to process the absurdity of what I was seeing. He wasn't broke, but he wasn't exactly in a position to drop 6 figures on a Tesla without a second thought. If anyone needed a reminder of that, it was him. The same guy who just last week whined about how expensive gas had gotten for our aging sedan. And yet, what had he been saying for weeks? Trump bought a brand new Tesla. If he has one, I should have one too. Could he really be that reckless? No, there's no way. I ran a hand over my face, debating whether to walk in there or just turn around and pretend I never saw this. Instead, I pulled out my phone and hit call. He picked up immediately, sounding almost too cheerful. Hey babe, I'm still at work, super busy. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, then exhaled through my nose. Oh? Since when do you work at Tesla? Silence. And then, click. He hung up. I stared at my phone, half in disbelief, half amused. Did he really think he could get away with this? I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, crossed my arms, and stared at the building in front of me. All right then, if my husband wasn't going to tell me what was going on, I'd find out myself. I stepped into the brightly lit showroom, the smell of new leather and fresh wax filling the air. And then I saw my husband. He was standing in front of a bright red Tesla Model S Plaid, eyes practically glowing like he had just discovered buried treasure. His fingers lightly traced the car's sleek exterior, a satisfied smile creeping onto his face. I tilted my head, wondering if he even remembered how much money was in our bank account. A sharp-looking salesman in a tailored suit stood beside him, enthusiastically pitching the deal. Sir, with just a small down payment today, we can set you up with a 60-month financing plan, making it incredibly easy to own your dream car. I raised an eyebrow. 60 months? I crossed my arms, took a step forward, and spoke loud enough to make sure he heard me. So, are you planning to buy this with our real money or from your imaginary billionaire account? My husband froze. He slowly turned around, eyes wide like he had just seen a ghost. For a brief second, he looked genuinely panicked. Then, he did what any guilty man would do. He forced a nervous smile. Babe! What a surprise. What are you doing here? I didn't answer. I just stared at him. A stare that told him there was no way out. The salesman, perhaps sensing the shift in energy, instinctively took a small step back. My husband scratched the back of his head, trying to look casual. I was just looking, doing some research. I tilted my head, my voice calm but sharp. Oh, really? So the part where you were nodding along to a 5-year loan plan, was that research? Or were you just working out your neck muscles? He let out a weak chuckle but didn't say a word. I took a deep breath, glancing over at the salesman, who was now suddenly very interested in studying the ceiling tiles. Then I turned back to my husband. Tell me, Jake, was it worth taking out a loan for this car? I didn't wait for my husband to come up with some pathetic excuse. Instead, I spun around and marched straight to the counter. The salesman, still looking slightly uncomfortable from our earlier exchange, straightened up as I approached. I placed both hands on the counter, leaned in slightly, and spoke loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. He just lied to his wife. I can guarantee he'll lie about his finances too. Cancel the transaction. Now. The entire showroom went silent. I could feel my husband's panic from behind me. The salesman glanced between the two of us, then cleared his throat awkwardly. Uh, Sir, you didn't get permission from your wife first? I slowly turned around, raising an eyebrow at my husband. He let out the most awkward laugh I'd ever heard, his face turning bright red, like a kid caught sneaking candy before dinner. I I mean, babe, I was gonna tell you. I cut him off with a simple wave of my hand. Nope. I turned back to the salesman. Listen, my husband is a wonderful man, but let's be honest, he's impulsive. If he tells you this is a well thought out financial decision, he's lying. And trust me, I'd be the one paying for it. The salesman slowly nodded, as if he had just realized something important about life. Meanwhile, my husband stood awkwardly, shifting his weight from foot to foot, probably calculating the fastest exit route. I crossed my arms and looked him straight in the eye. Let me get this straight. You saw Trump buy a Tesla, convinced yourself you needed one too, and your grand plan was to sign up for a 5-year loan without telling your wife? He scratched the back of his neck. When you put it like that, it sounds kinda bad. I threw my hands up. That's because it is! The salesman took one final look at my husband, then slowly moved his mouse toward the cancel transaction button. So, I assume we won't be proceeding with the financing? My husband exhaled in defeat. Yeah. Let's cancel it. I let out a deep breath, finally feeling the tension in my chest ease. Without saying another word, I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving my husband standing there in silence. The automatic doors slid open, and the cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside. As I reached my car, I paused for a moment, my fingers tapping lightly against the hood. I couldn't help but shake my head and laugh. Men and their financial decisions. The moment we stepped out of the dealership, Jake finally let out the frustration he had been holding in. Did you really have to humiliate me in there? He huffed, walking a few steps ahead of me. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you expecting me to nod along while you signed away 5 years of our money on a whim? He sighed, rubbing his temples. I thought it was a good idea at the time. I crossed my arms. And now? Jake looked at me, then glanced back at the Tesla showroom. He sighed again, slower this time, like reality was finally settling in. Okay, maybe a Tesla isn't exactly what we need right now. I smirked. You think? He chuckled, shaking his head as we walked toward our car. By the time we pulled onto the highway, the tension had mostly faded. I decided to lighten the mood. So, next time Trump buys a yacht, are you planning to sell our house to keep up? Jake let out a dry laugh and rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe, if I hit the lottery first. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help but laugh. For all his crazy ideas and impulsive decisions, I knew one thing for sure. We were still a team, even when my husband was being an absolute lunatic.